Another day dawned as Cheong-san opened his eyes. He knew he was getting restless. They had food and warmth in this room, but he knew that the friends he left had none of that upstairs. "What's on your mind?" Na-Yeon's voice stopped his train of thoughts as he glanced down at her resting on his chest. He had resisted it for a while, but he knew that he wanted to sleep and she didn't seem to be causing problems. "I was thinking that we should try get the food to the others." He immediately felt her tense up and unconsciously wrapped an arm around her waist. It took him a second to realize what he had done and went to pull away. But Na-Yeon quickly grasped his arm, pressing into back against her waist. "How would we even get to the others?" That was just the thing Cheong-san was thinking. "Well, it's more like, how do I get it to them?" She shot up, breaking his hold on her as she propped herself up and looked at him with what he could describe as raw fear. "You're going to leave me, aren't you?" He saw the telltale sign of unshed tears on her eyes and quickly went to reassure her. "No, I'm not. I am just going to scout it out first, then see if we can move together if there aren't too many of them. Don't want to risk you getting hurt." That surprised her. The whole reason was so she could be safe. "But what's to stop you from not coming back?" "Well, the food, the classroom, and my promise." She looked at him confusedly. "Remember, I promised that I was going to do my best to get you out, to get everyone out." She could see the resolve in his eyes and the steely gaze that he had on his face. "Okay, I trust you." She didn't know why those words felt heavier than they should have, but it was most likely all of the reasons he had not to trust her. But he just replied to her with a firm nod, not breaking his gaze as he slowly got up. Na-Yeon sat down on the floor on what had sort of become their bed in the past few days as she saw him preparing himself. He wrapped gauntlets around his wrist, and makeshift shin guards, and grabbed the bat. Cheong-san looked at her and he could still see the doubt on her features. "I promise I will be back." He reached out his hand in an act that seemed so much more as she slowly got up and walked towards him. Their eyes met each other as she replied with her own firm nod and reached out to grab his hand. She saw him hesitate, most likely about to pull it back, but he didn't as they held their hands briefly looking at each other. Cheong-san could feel her soft, delicate fingers, the grooves in her hands, the softness and their warmth, but he quickly reminded himself that those hands carried the blood of his friend and quickly broke their hold. They broke eye contact with each other, having known the reason why he did it. "I will get going." Moments later they stood by the door as they both glanced out of the classroom. They could see one or two of them on the far left side, but on the other side, they could only hear a groan or two but had no way to see what was going on, and making noise was out of the question. Whilst they were looking outside, Cheong-san kept throwing small glances toward Na-Yeon. She could feel his glances but decided to ignore them. They were probably hostile and making sure she wasn't doing anything. But the glances were anything but as Cheong-san looked her up and down, he could still feel the warmth of her hands, her breath on his neck as she slept, and how small and fragile she felt in his arms. He quickly shook those thoughts. This wasn't the time to be having them, especially for her, anyone else but her. He glanced down at her arms, then looked at his. "Come here." She looked at him nervously but slowly approached. He grabbed her hands, looking them over curiously. Na-Yeon was doing her best to maintain her composure because she didn't know why he was doing it. "We need to get you some arm and shin guards," he said, grabbing her hand and leading her back into the room. He told himself that he was doing it to help her out, but another voice in the back of his head that sounded too much like his best friend told him otherwise, and he didn't know whether it was in spite or taunting. They got back into the room as he went about putting makeshift arm guards, whilst Na-Yeon just watched him as he did it in silence. He finished up rather quickly and had the other shin ones ready. As he was about to crouch down, he stopped himself. Cheong-san looked up at her. "Can you do it?" She just looked away, not knowing how to answer. Can you do it for me?" They both knew she could probably do it herself, even if Na-Yeon thought she might do it somewhat badly. Cheong-san hesitated a moment and then went to touch her legs to attach the makeshift shin guards. They both saw him hesitate and linger a moment on her legs before he shook some sense into himself and got to work. After he was done, he rose up and they just made awkward eye contact. I should get going now, they both nodded and went to the door again. He opened the door with Na-Yeon waiting behind him as she slowly closed it. He looked back at her for a moment as they gave a nod to each other before he bolted down the hall. The trek back to the floor with his friends was fairly eventful as he soon reached the door. He didn't want to know why most of the zombies were not here, but the answer was mostly obvious: someone hadn't been so lucky. After a small knock on the door and silently shouting "It's Cheong-san," the door swung open as he was dragged inside. The first thing he received was a slap from Onjo before receiving a hug. "You idiot," she said between silent sobs. He stood there momentarily stunned before he hugged her back and looked around the room. "Are you guys okay?" Everyone just nodded as he pulled out of the hug from Onjo. Soo-hyuk walked up to him giving him a slap on his shoulder. "Damn, you're still alive." He nodded at him. "It's going to take a lot more than that to kill me." Cheong-san took in the room before he thought of his plan. "We need to find a walk to talk to anyone outside and call anyone to help." Onjo chimed in after finally composing herself. "So, did you find her?" she asked, breaking the talks that were about to happen on a plan to get out. Everyone had wanted to ask that when he came back in, but the room went silent as everyone waited for the answer. "I found her." Their reactions weren't anything to go by either. They didn't seem happy or angry, just reserved. "So where is she now?" Namra asked, walking towards him. "She's down a floor on the far side in a classroom. I think we should move there when we can because there's food and more space." One of the boys, who he still didn't remember the name of, wanted to ask a question but he simply blocked it off. "We don't have the time. We need to figure out how to get out of here soon." Namra still seemed hesitant though. "Why should we trust her?" The question was asked to seemingly nobody, but they knew who they were talking about and why. "We will deal with that later. Now I'm going to go look for a phone to call outside. We will see if we can get out of here." He turned to leave and felt his hand chuckled by Onjo. "We can just wait here." He was scared too, just as much as everybody, but he knew there was no time right now. "We need to do this. I'll be back." He walked towards the door and saw Soo-hyuk with a makeshift spear and shield next to him. "I'm coming with you." He was about to argue with him but was interrupted by Onjo stepping in. "No, I have to. Some must watch his back." Something about seeing the two of them like this stung, but he quickly shook it off. "Let's go." Cheong-san and Soo-hyuk left the room soon after, making sure to search any open rooms they found, trying to find a phone. They searched for a while, dodging and killing some zombies that they found, even if most of them were strays. After descending a lot of floors and searching in a classroom, the inevitable finally happened as they reached the ground floor. One moment they were searching a room, the next they were separated by a massive horde. "Go, Soo-hyuk, I'll come find you. I'm at classroom 251. They split up, each running in a different direction as the zombies gave chase. Cheong-san was so glad he had gotten some sleep with Na-Yeon. As he ducked into the library and locked the door, he turned around and was met by the sight of Gwinom. "You piece of shit," he shouted before he charged at Cheong-san. The two chased each other around the room, with Cheong-san being tackled into a wall and then beaten down by Gwinom. "You know I was looking for someone in this place. So glad I found you. It means with a world like this, I can end you for good." At those words, Cheong-san punched up, catching Gwinom in the balls as the bully dropped to his knees, grunting in pain as he dropped the knife. He looked up to a slowly standing Cheong-san who swiftly kicked him in the head, sending him sprawling on the floors. "I'm going to kill As Gwenom slowly started to recover, a loud crashing came from the other side of the library. They both turned and saw the waves of zombies rushing. Gwenom was too far from his knife. As he tried to reach for it, a zombie charged at him and he grabbed a chair, breaking it over its head. The bully turned around and saw Cheong-san climbing to the top of the bookshelf and proceeded to do the same, narrowly avoiding a gang of zombies after him. Cheong-san and Gwenom engaged in another game of cat and mouse before Gwenom with his more athletic body hopped over to Cheong-san's side of the shelf. They started fighting again, Cheong-san still losing but not having as bad a time because Gwenom was holding back in order not to risk falling into a mass of zombies that had gathered around the shelf they fought on. Gwenom kicked away the other shelf, almost tipping the one they stood on, but the domino effect it had on taking out all the other shelves was heartbreaking. "You're going to kill us both," but Cheong-san could see the smile on Gwenom's face and he didn't seem to care. "As long as you're dead." Gwenom overpowered Cheong-san as he got on top of him and started to choke him out. Cheong-san couldn't breathe as his nails were weakly scratching at Gwenom's face. He could feel his strength fading and black spots appearing in his vision as he looked at a smiling Gwenom. Visions and images started appearing in his vision. His mom, Anjo, the pictures of his father, everyone trusting him in the broadcast room, and the final vision. It was Na-Yeon crying and the final words she had uttered to him, "I trust you." That gave him a surge of strength as he saw how Gwenom was mounting himself on top of him. With a burst of unknown strength he brought himself down and pushed up his hips, making Gwenom lose balance. With one final push in succession, he flipped Gwenom off the top of him as he fell towards the waiting horde below. He could hear the screams Gwenom was giving out, begging Cheong-san to save him. Cheong-san finally righted himself and their eyes met as Gwenom stopped screaming, but he was still crying, and the look on his face as their eyes met was pure hate. He looked at Cheong-san as he disappeared under the massive crowd of zombies, with a lone hand reaching out as if trying to reach out to Cheong-san. He took a moment to breathe before he stood up slowly and looked around with one thought on his mind: "I have to get back."